Garrity,
Here.
Nordentoff,
Here.
Half,
Here.
Haysack,
Here.
Riley, Sula.
Present, we do have a quorum. If everyone would stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I don't have the official script, but the current governor's order.
I'm sorry, I forgot to include that.
Okay, but the current governor's order allows members to attend remotely. We have 2 members attending remotely this evening, and I guess 1 member from the petitioner is going to be remote as well. So I just wanted to state that for the record. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the meeting that was held on April 15th. Does anybody have any questions, comments? If not, a motion to approve would be in order.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Moved by Mr. Paff,
I'll second.
seconded by Mr. Bow. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is the approval of the minutes from the meeting that was held on May 6th, 2020. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or concerns? If not, a motion to approve would be in order.
Make a motion to approve as written.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Garrity, second by Mr. Bow. All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing. It's a special use permit request by Restaurant Depot. Tracy, staff
Sure.
report, please.
Sure. Restaurant Depot is seeking a special use permit to allow the development of a Restaurant Depot facility with exterior elevations that depart from the requirement that they consist of office-type architecture. Restaurant Depot, which is a wholesale facility that sells food and supplies to food service operators, is proposing a 54,500 square foot facility on property zoned I-1 Restricted Industrial, located east of Tri-State Parkway, approximately 800 feet south of the Holiday Inn. Mr. Brian Grassa of Cedarburg Development is here to walk the PZB through the proposed plans.
Okay, as this is a public hearing, I would request that anyone who intends to give testimony or ask questions to please stand and be sworn in by the acting village attorney.
Do you promise to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. I'll turn the floor over to you. If you could use the microphone, please.
I'm sure my voice will carry
Yeah,
on.
but the trouble is the meetings are recorded.
Okay, that's,
I can hear you just fine, but sometimes the mic, sometimes this,
You'll have thousands viewing you later.
yeah, they'll be asking for your autograph. Okay, if you can just state your name and affiliation for the record, and if there's anything you'd like to add to what Tracy presented.
yes, my name is Brian Grassa. I'm with a company called Cedarwood Development. We are the development manager overseeing this project for Restaurant Depot. I am joined tonight actually with Ms. Heather Mize, who's the project architect. She is on the phone, and she would be more versed in the building architecture that we're proposing here. But specifically, we are asking for relief from specific language that states, I quote, "consists of office-type exterior architecture." And our proposed use really isn't compatible with typical office-type architecture. And so based on that, I'll let Heather speak. We do have a material board at the end of the riser there that could be used to help illustrate the materials that we are proposing to use on the board. And up on the screen, we do have our conceptual elevations of the building of what we are proposing tonight. So, Heather?
I am here.
And
Thanks,
Heather-
Brian.
Heather, I assume you stood and got sworn in with Brian.
Yes.
Okay. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
I can.
Great, okay. So as Brian said, I'm the architect for the Restaurant Depot project. Just a brief introduction about Restaurant Depot as a company. They are a cash and carry wholesaler, as was described in the application. It serves mainly mom and pop type food and beverage, mom and pop type restaurants. So the building here will be, restaurant owners or nonprofits will come to the building. Inside, it looks something like a Costco or a Sam's Club with high bay racking, and customers will come in, pick out their product, pay for it, and then take it with them. Inside the building, a good portion of it, 1/4 to 1/3 of the floor plan of this 55,000 square feet, is actually devoted to cooler and freezer. And so that is the piece that operationally makes it difficult for us to have office-type architecture, because the wall of the building that is facing Tri-State Parkway is actually directly inside that exterior wall is a cooler and freezer, a large walk-in refrigerated 24-foot high box. And then similarly on the opposite side facing north to the right-of-way, that will be high bay racking, but dry goods, so paper towels and beverages and things like that. So the interior layout of the space doesn't lend itself to having a lot of windows or glazing or things of that nature. What we have done to comply with what the code requires is we provided some stepping up and down vertically. You can see there's some changes in the parapet height, and on the higher parapet, we're proposing a cornice. And then on the north-facing wall, which will be the main entrance for customers to the building, we have a deep canopy. It's about 72 feet deep that will cover the parking, and customers use that so that if they come in rain or snow, they're able to load their products out of the weather. So that's an additional feature that breaks up the mass of the building. We have also used some upgraded materials. A typical Restaurant Depot is just a white box with a blue stripe on it. That's kind of their trademark look for their building. So in this case, we've gone a step further. We still have the white panels, which you can see on the material board. It's an insulated panel with a pre-finished white finish, and it has kind of a stucco texture to it. All of the panel joints are, the fasteners are all concealed, so it's a nice looking panel. And then interspaced with that, the tan color that you see on the rendering is actually a Texcoat panel, or in this case it's called a tough cast finish. And it's more of like a pebble sandy type finish. It has a different look, different reflectivity than the metal panels. So in addition to being a darker color, it will read as a slightly different material, which will help break up that massing. And then also at the base of the building, facing the 3 roads, so south, west, and north elevations, at the base of the building, we are proposing a band of dark brown brick. So that will tie together that tan accent as well. And then we've got this blue stripe, which I mentioned is kind of a characteristic of all the Restaurant Depot projects. Inside that blue stripe, we've placed a few windows. Those are a blue colored glass, Arctic blue pink Pilkington glass that'll be seen on that sample board. And those windows are actually up high enough that they are above the ceiling of the cooler and freezer, and higher than most of the product will be stored in the building. So those will be functional windows. In addition, there's a large equipment area for the refrigeration equipment. You can see that on the right side of the west exterior elevation. That is refrigeration equipment that will be enclosed with a stained cedar fence. So that's the general description of what the building looks like and some of the materials that we're using, and what we've done to attempt to break down the mass of the building and get, as close as we can to an office-type architecture within the limits of our operations and what we're trying to contain inside.
I would just also like to add, for the board, is I'm sure you're more familiar than I am, the area that this building is going to be built right now, we're going to be abutting an existing hotel to our north, and then to our, would be east is the power transmission lines and the cemetery. To our west, our agricultural fields, and to our south is a vacant lot that is actually owned by Restaurant Depot, as well as some leftover land. So there's no immediate context of buildings that abut this building that it would look out of place or out of sorts, especially with the openness with the power line easement and cemetery to our east. So I just wanted to give a little bit of context to the building as to what's going on out there. So pending any questions for either myself or Heather.
Members of the Planning and Zoning Board?
I just have,
Edwin?
I guess just one question. Did Holiday Inn give any feedback? You hear?
We sent out the legal notice and we did not hear anything from Holiday Inn.
Okay.
Dave, any questions or comments?
I guess from my perspective, I think that the standard for office architecture is a challenge in itself, because I think if you're building an office to be an office, all those considerations are taken in from the point in time when the plan is made. This is a warehouse wholesale operation that I already immediately thought prior to this meeting starting felt very much Costco or Sam's Club like, and I don't think that you can take a building that's to this scale and do a whole lot with it that will make it so that you drive by and go, oh, that's a very nice office. So I think what we've achieved is an upgraded facade to an industrial wholesale building. And I think I look at it through that set of lenses and saying, okay, given the surroundings, given the fact that it's, in a sense, kind of tied in with Tri-State, is it still appropriate architecture and an improved architecture over what we would have gotten as a standard out of the box, so to speak. So, to throw some awnings or canopies or fake windows or whatever, I still think you drive by and say, nice job trying to make an industrial building look like an office. Yeah, nice try. So I think from that standpoint, I don't look at this and say, well, we've achieved what we wanted to achieve. But I think it's still an improvement over maybe what we would have had to begin with.
Josh?
Hi, everybody. Josh Pasak here. I think of it more in terms of I don't have any specific questions for the petitioner. I'll just kind of share and kind of mention one thing that Dave just mentioned, which is in the context of the neighborhood. I don't think a pure Costco would be out of place. Aside from the standards themselves, I think a warehouse would fit that neighborhood. And with these upgrades, I don't think it would be out of sorts. I don't think that it would stick out like a sore thumb in the context of the neighborhood and where it is behind Holiday Inn, down the street from, yes, some office space, but also some warehouse space. That on the surface level, that's just my opinion. I wasn't particularly looking for the upgrades when I read through it, and when I drove through the neighborhood. I do like the improvements, but I do think it would fit in okay with the neighborhood.
Tim?
I don't have any questions. Thank you for the presentation. I believe it's appropriate use.
Okay, Brian?
I have no comments.
I'm kind of torn. If it was tucked away in the middle of the business center someplace, I'd feel less exercised about it. But it's on the main drag, and it's kind of a focal point to the character of the rest of the Tri-State Industrial Park. And correct me if I'm wrong, staff, aren't most of the buildings in Tri-State tilt-up construction, or?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, the warehouse buildings or the industrial high clear buildings are all tilt-up panels.
I mean, we don't have any, I hate to use the word Butler, but we don't have any metal buildings out there, do we?
No.
And, I mean, we use the example of Costco's or Sam's. I mean, they don't do Butler-looking buildings either. I mean, they do tilt-up or split-face black or some sort of aesthetically appealing material. I'm not wildly enthused about it, to be very, very honest about it. So, at this time, I'll open the floor to the public as a matter of formality. There is nobody here from the public, so I'll now close the floor to the public. Second round of comments or questions from the Planning and Zoning Board members?
Mr. Chairman, hey, it's Dave.
Yes?
I agree with some of your assessment on this. I didn't have a chance to do an analysis of Tri-State, but I didn't realize that we didn't have anything within there that was not of metal. So I agree. And if we can still achieve an upgraded building material above a metal panel, that would still help me go a long way. You know, I don't think in the end, like I said before, I don't have a problem, I guess, if it doesn't look like an office when I drive by, but I think we should still push to have the highest degree of quality of materials as possible, again, given the presence. So I do agree with your position on that.
Okay, thank you, Dave. I mean, I just look at the western elevation. That's a big, long stretch of metal panels, guys. Josh, any additional comments?
No. I mean, I definitely appreciate what you're saying, you and Dave, and I get it. I don't see it as that glaring of an eyesore. It doesn't, for a better term, offend me, and I'm not saying it's offensive. I'm quite okay with that material and in that neighborhood because it's, right off of Grand, and then just right down the road. And I know the road to the middle school right there, and then we have the office park, and then we have what appears to be warehouse space peppered all the way to Washington. Yeah, of course, it'd be great to have nicer material, but to Dave's point, I'm also not opposed to not seeing, an office facade right there, in what today is an empty lot. I just, this whole area seems to be I just can't imagine what a buffer would look like. And even if we do get that upgraded, I mean, is it really, I'm not sure what a big difference it would make. And that's just my personal opinion. I mean, that's why we're having this discussion.
So if I could.
May I make a clarification on the metal panels?
Yes.
If you're done, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to point out, most people, when they think of a metal building or a Butler style building, think of the corrugated panels that are, kind of an R panel or a corrugated look. And I just wanted to clarify that that's not what we're proposing here. The panels that we're proposing are flush, so a continuous surface with a little texture to it. And then all you'll see is every 42 inches there would be a joint, but it doesn't have that same wave or corrugation that is often associated with the metal panels. And again, the tan is more of a stucco type look or a sand type look. So it's going to have a different appearance as well, but certainly, again, not the corrugated style.
To play in on that, Mr. Sula, and I'm a little bit at a disadvantage, I don't have the code right in front of me, but the materials that we're proposing here, I believe, are all acceptable materials within this zoning district. And working with staff, we did go back and forth a couple of times on iterations, and we're trying to present something that is an upgrade from a regular metal panel, as Heather pointed out, specifically with the tan panels. Those will actually be more of an ephes type finish and style, and the other metal panels are actually used quite a bit in construction and modern architecture today. I think what we were struggling with was trying to achieve the office type exterior architecture, and that's specifically what we're asking for some help and relief on tonight. Now, I understand what you're saying about the materials, but we've tried to work within that palette of materials that are contained within the zoning code. And Mr. Ziegler or Ms. Velker can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I believe.
Dave looks like he wants to talk.
Well, I was just going to confirm that same fact, that within the I-1 zoning district, metal panels are allowed as a principal building material. You know, and the question before the Planning and Zoning Board tonight is just the question of whether this is relief on the office type architecture. So it's really not a material question as it is more of a style question.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from members of the Planning and Zoning Board? If not, a motion a motion in the,
Sure, I'll make a motion.
I was looking for the word.
In the affirmative.
A motion in the form of a recommendation to the village board would be appropriate.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to forward a favorable recommendation on the petition of Brian M. Grassa of Cedarwood Development on behalf of Restaurant Depot for a special use permit to allow building elevations that front onto a public street to depart from the requirement that they consist of office-type exterior architecture, subject to being in substantial conformance with the plans presented to the Planning and Zoning Board on 6/17/2020.
I will second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Garrity, a second by Mr. Bao. Any discussion on the motion? We have a roll call, please.
Bao,
Aye.
Garrity,
Aye.
Nordentoff,
Aye.
Paff,
Aye.
Pasak,
Aye.
Sula.
No. The motion does carry, and as you probably know, we are a recommending body to the village board, and the village board will take up in this matter and make a final decision. And Tracy or Dave can let you know exactly when that'll happen. They're typically like 3-4 weeks out, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
2, 3, yeah, 3 weeks.
Okay, next item on the agenda is a request for a parking modification for Restaurant Depot.
Okay.
Tracy?
The zoning ordinance establishes a maximum number of parking spaces for all uses over 5,000 square feet, except restaurants and uses in the C5 and C6 districts. The maximum is set at 115% of the required minimum number of parking spaces. For Restaurant Depot, which is in the I-1 district and is a 54,540 square foot wholesale use, the zoning ordinance requires a minimum of 55 parking spaces with a maximum of 64. Restaurant Depot is proposing to install 156 parking spaces, or 284% of the required minimum. The zoning ordinance provides the zoning board of appeal, the zoning board, planning and zoning board, the authority to approve a modification, reduction, or waiver of the requirements of the parking article if they find that, in the particular case, the nature of the use, the exceptional shape or size of the property, or other exceptional situation or condition would justify such action. The petitioner has provided materials regarding their request, which has been provided to the PZB members. Mr. Grassa is here to walk the PZB through the request and materials.
Okay, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Good evening. Again, I'm Brian Grassa with Cedarwood Development. And the second issue that I'd like to bring before the board has to do with parking. So as we've discussed before, our use is we are a wholesaler to the restaurant and beverage industry, whereas we have customers that come to this facility and primarily come in the early morning and early afternoons so they can prepare for their dinner and lunch rush hours. So we do have quite an influx of customers at one time. Secondly, the requirement of maximum spacing of only 64 spaces with an average shift size of workers being in the 40-plus employees, we would take up most of our parking just by the employees that are working in the facility on any one time. So we're asking relief due to the uniqueness of our use here to go to roughly 160 spaces. And if we could go back to the other slide, so we have keep records and done comparables of existing facilities throughout the country, and you can see that we range anywhere from 149 to 209 spaces, depending on the size of the store. Our typical, prototypical store is 55,000 square feet, and we really strive to get into that 160 parking space range. We feel that services our customers the best and allows us to park everybody. Our parking, go back to the site plan if you will. The majority of our parking will be in the north field there, and we have proposed ample screening to our neighbor to the north, the Holiday Inn, and try to minimize our parking along the street, and through the use of street trees and proper landscaping, I think we could achieve an aesthetically pleasing site. And as you can see, circulation is maintained without crowding the site. We don't have a lack of land here. We will provide proper stormwater retention and treatment to deal with the impervious area, but really the number of spaces being proposed here is going to be a minimum to properly service this type of business. Heather, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you've covered everything, Brian. I think you've covered all of it.
Okay. Questions?
I'll start. First, my question is for staff, just for a framework. These are two separate lots, correct?
No, it is currently one large lot.
It is one, okay, because on the drawing, it looks like there's a lot line.
No, it's currently one large lot.
Okay.
Our intent at some point in the future would be to subdivide that parcel of land.
Which parcel?
The one shown in dark green to our
The
south.
vacant, the vacant to the south.
Okay, so I guess my question for staff is, because it makes a big difference in my mind, if it's one big lot, I get how stormwater management and runoff can be accommodated. Now that we've rolled out that perhaps we want to subdivide sometime in the future, to me that takes a heck of a lot of green space away, and I need some input in terms of how well we're going to be able to make, because I don't see any retention or detention ponds. I don't see anything to handle the runoff, so
Well,
how are we from an engineering point of view?
we've looked at, from a preliminary standpoint, we're confident that we can achieve the stormwater retention. In fact, it's graphically shown by that blue area along the main street. That would be our main retention area, since everything flows basically to the west, and we would intercept it and treat it before it enters the main stormwater system. So, you know, the rule of thumb is roughly 10% of your land area for retention. I am confident with the engineers who we work with throughout the country will be able to meet all your stormwater regulations. But to your point, we do have the benefit of extra land. If we are unable to prove to engineering during permit review that we don't have enough retention there, we do have more land that we could expand and utilize for our retention area.
And ideally, we would like to see a common detention facility between the two lots. Something that would allow for, you know, some efficiencies. What they're showing here doesn't scare me. You know, a lot of it will be figured out as we get into the final engineering and also into the subdivision process where that lot line ends up landing and what types of cross easements we would need. We would also look for some cross access to utilize the existing south driveway so that we're not exiting from the south side onto the curve. So that's something we've discussed already amongst staff.
Oh, okay.
And, you know, would have to work through some of those details if and when that ever decides to be a secondary lot.
Okay, so in terms of building in massive parking area, Dave, you're not troubled from an engineering point of view about stormwater retention or management, I guess is the better word for it.
I think they've got adequate room to serve the site, whether it be on the footprint that they're currently showing or expanding out onto this area to the south. A lot of it will be figured out in final engineering once you can determine the bounce of the detention pond. So that's really the key. You know, footprint's one thing, but how much you can bounce, which is dependent upon your outlet. And we're not far enough along into the design to really have that level of information yet.
Okay. All right. I'm comfortable that if they say they need that much parking based on their other businesses, that they need that much parking, so I'm okay with the business reason for it. I was just mainly concerned about the engineering. Any other questions or comments from members of the Planning and Zoning Board? Brian's shaking his head no. Josh?
Nope.
Dave?
I'm good on my end, thank you.
Okay. Everybody else seems to be okay here?
I just have one
go ahead.
question. One thing that really kind of shocked me is I didn't realize when we talked about this, the Restaurant Depot before, was that they had that much traffic. Is there any plans for improvement there for like turn lanes or anything? Sounds like a lot of people coming in and out at one time.
Well, I can address that, and I don't have the benefit of having our traffic study in front. We haven't done a specific traffic study on this site, but what we find and what we show in our traffic reports, that our traffic is generated off-peak. It's not during the rush hours in the morning, it's not during the rush hours in the evening, because that's when our customers are operating their businesses, right? So our traffic that is generated is typically off-peak traffic, which really goes a long way in not taxing the existing roadway system.
Earlier, when you were doing your presentation, you mentioned that they came early morning and in the afternoon. So that's what kind of surprised me, because I did read that they weren't in rush hour, but during your presentation, you mentioned they came early morning. That would be rush hour to me.
I think you're raising interesting questions, but I think it's beyond the scope of
Okay.
this particular topic.
All right.
Make a motion if you'd like.
Yeah, a motion in the in the form of a approval or denial would be in order.
So I'll make a motion to approve the request of Brian M. Grassa of Cedarwood Development on behalf of Restaurant Depot for parking modification to allow parking in excess of the 115% allowed by code up to a maximum of 285% of the minimum code requirement consistent with the applicant's petition and testimony.
I will second that motion.
Motion by Mr. Garrity, second by Mr. Bow. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Bow,
Aye.
Garrity,
Aye.
Nordentoff,
Aye.
Half,
Aye.
Pasek,
Aye.
Sula.
Aye, motion carries. And as you probably heard in this particular case, that's all you need to do, so.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. Next meeting on the calendar is scheduled for July 1st. Are we anticipating a meeting?
We do not have any public hearings set up at this time.
Okay. I just want to acknowledge, we received the planning update summary of, I don't know, nearly about a dozen different projects that have come before us recently, and thanks staff for giving us those updates. Those are always nice to hear about. There's nobody here from the public, so I'm not going to open the floor to the public. Motion to adjourn to be in order.
I'll moves.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries.
Aye.
All right, thanks, everyone.